Ivan, this is Roy from Nice to Mastery, and today I'm excited to have Eric Landau, who's a CTO of Cord, which is into applied physics. Eric has done his bachelor's in physics from Stanford University and MS in electrical engineering. Cord is building software that allows data scientists and researchers to algorithmically to solve the problem of creating and managing training data for machine learning applications, starting computer vision, replacing thousands of hours of manual labor. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So you started in Harvard and Stanford, and you have a good number of experience. What got you interested to get into startups, and what made you start Cord?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So I started originally. I was my academic background was in physics, so I wanted to be a physicist. I started my PhD. And I had done all of my time in research, so I was always like working in research labs over the summer. And I decided it would be a good idea to try the real world for at least a year. So I took a leave of absence from the PhD, and it ended up becoming just a very long leave of absence because I just never came back. So I worked in quantitative trading for a long time, and after a while, I just got a little bit bored because I was solving the same class of problems over and over again. And I was interested in doing something where I got to solve a different set of problems, and the sets of problems that you're encountering are dynamic. And I think entrepreneurship is really the best space for that, because your job is essentially changing every year. And so that's what really attracted me to start a company.
And when you were young, you really liked physics, or is it something in your family or in your background that you enjoyed? If somebody in your family member was into physics, that got you interested in that?
Yeah, I always really liked math and physics when I was a kid, and I was definitely encouraged by my parents. There's a famous physicist, Lev Landau, who's a Russian physicist. And my grandfather would joke that he was from the rich side of the family because he grew up in Brazil, but emigrated from Russia a long time ago. So I knew that was somewhere in my family tree, and I just liked math and physics, and so I felt like that was a natural direction for me.
Interesting. And you mentioned you're born in Brazil, and then you lived in US, and now you're in UK. Was it a natural progression, or was something you planned that you would want to live in a different country and have different experiences, perspectives?
No, it was all just essentially saying yes to things. It's like, oh, do you want to go here? Yeah, I'll go. And at the time, UK was a good portal to the rest of Europe. No longer. But so it was nice to travel, and I ended up just staying for quite some time.
And you worked in trading with DRW. What was the experience there? And does trading really help build Cord or build something which really helped you start your startup?
Yeah, I think it helped in the sense of going through a lot of data and processing a lot of data, building a ton of models. So we built thousands of models, and we're constantly pushing them out into the real world. And you get a lot of high frequency feedback about one thing that you do or one thing that you try. You find out very quickly whether it works or not. And that is that iteration cycle and that loop is very useful in trading, and it's very useful when you're starting a company, because you don't always know whether what you're doing is the best strategy or not. So it's how to close that loop and make your decisions as empirical as possible, and get some kind of signal back such that you can guide yourself and the company in the right direction. So I think from that kind of high level standpoint, it helps, and from the perspective of particular model building, it also helped a bit.
And since you worked in the company for I think close to 8 years, is Cord something very different from other products in the market? How did that happen? which led you to start Cord?
Yeah, so it was actually the idea of my co-founder Ulrich. So it came out of his master's project at Imperial College London, and at the time and still now, the main way that companies build AI models is with supervised learning. So you need a lot of labeled training data, and to get that labeled training data, like the predominant method is you send the data overseas, and it's labeled by factories filled with people. They're drawing boxes and polygons over images and videos. And what Ulrich did in his master's, and what we were thinking about when we were originally starting the company, was trying to figure out ways that we can automate that in as most efficient way as possible. So that's really where we started, and kind of what we built since starting Cord from a technological perspective.
Right, and what are the sort of brands and companies that you work for, and your competitors in this space?
Yeah, it's a mix of a lot of different kinds of AI companies. About half of them are in the medical space. So we're doing a lot of work with people that are building GI applications, for instance. But it's a pretty big mix vertical wise. Other than that, and the profile of the company tends to be like mid-tier startup kind of thing. Those are the main companies that are building AI in like a very kind of cutting edge way, at least.
Correct. And when you talk about AI, what do all these definitions within AI mean? A lot of people say that would say that they're a fintech company, or they'll talk about that they're an AI company. But what would you categorize as AI?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it's people get pretty pretentious over like what AI is, but to me, AI is just automation. So you have a task or you have a problem. How do you take it from a problem that's navigated from like a human cognitive perspective to translating to something that a machine can do? And it just turns out to be that a lot of the problems that we care about, you can't solve them from normal deterministic programming. Like, here's a program that does A, B, C, and D. You have to solve it with this more kind of statistical methodology. And that statistical methodology is essentially what we call AI or machine learning today. But it's not like it's building a consciousness per se. It's just solving a bunch of different problems in an automated way.
And is machine learning and deep learning different from AI?
Yeah, people make distinctions. Machine learning is maybe like the broader category, but I don't like get too much concerned with like what the distinctions are. I think it comes down to, here's a problem, how do you solve it? You solve it with A, B, C, and D. You can call it whatever you want, but it's going to be A, B, C, and D from like a technical perspective.
Right, and you also mentioned that you target mid-tier startups, but is your customer segment data scientists and researchers? Because you're solving a problem for them, and how do you find those data scientists?
Yeah, there's three key stakeholders in the companies that we sell to. One is the ML engineers and data scientists. So those are the end consumers of the labeled training data. Those are the ones that are building the model. And they don't necessarily care how the sausage is made. They just want to have a lot of high quality data. Then another key stakeholder is the ops managers. So those are usually the ones that are controlling the actual process of how do you create and manage this labeled training data. And the final one is the annotators themselves. So those are the people that are doing the annotations or doing the reviews and doing the quality assurance over the labels. And so you have to kind of fit all three stakeholders when you're selling the product to a company.
Right, and when you started the company, how did you reach out to this audience, and how did you what's your acquisition channel in order to get these people on board?
Yeah, it's a good question, because like it's really a grab bag, and when you're like starting a company in the very beginning, it just kind of like flailing in water and you're just trying to do anything that you can to grab customers. So we got some from word of mouth, some from like content pieces that we wrote, some from public launches, some from cold outreach, some from our networks. And we are just experimenting very heavily on different channels and seeing what would yield customers and what wouldn't. So the final result that we got tends to be like quite a distributed set of strategies.
All right, and you wrote a great post on Medium, which is called "What I Learned from My First Month at Y Combinator." We'll put that in the show notes. And you said something very interesting about sales. That sales is a search problem and not a persuasion problem. You also talked about reaching out to people. Hundreds of calls or meetings in a week, and not doing just a couple of calls. But what do you mean that sales is a search problem and not a persuasion problem for listeners?
Because it's really just trying to find needles in the haystack, and the needles here are people that have the problem that you're solving. So if you have a product that actually solves the problem, the sales isn't really persuading them to do it. It's just showing them that, hey, this does it and this does it in a very effective way. But to find those needles, there's just such a high cost. And so I always thought of sales as like a used car salesman, where you're going and you're using rhetoric or whatever techniques to try to get someone to buy something that they ended up not wanting to buy. But really it's the other way. It's people want to buy this, and the secret is just finding the people that want to buy it. And to do that, there's not a lot of great strategies except for just casting a very wide net. So especially if you're an early stage startup, you just have to reach out to a bunch of people, and then of that funnel, some will have the problem that you're solving, and of those, some will want to talk to you, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why, a lot of sales organizations, it's really just about volume and throughput of cold calls that they do and emails that they do, because they're just casting this net to search for as many people that can have that problem as possible. And that was a revelation to me during YC. Is I don't have to convince people, I just have to find them. And then if you think of it that way, then it actually unlocks a lot in the sales process, makes it a lot easier.
Right. And I believe you're part of the YC 2021 batch. What was your experience, and do you think Y Combinator can really disrupt the education, higher education market?
I really enjoyed the experience at YC. So it was a remote batch. So we didn't get to meet anyone in person, but they still, I think, logistically were able to handle everything quite admirably, and do all the connections, all the Zoom calls. It was pretty seamless. And YC, the main value that I got was the focus on growth and the accountability that comes with that. So before, Ulrich and I are engineers, our natural tendency is just to build product and to try to solve these things technically. But in Y Combinator, their mantra is just to grow as much as you can and to choose a metric that reflects that growth. So once we had that in our mind, is okay, we can't just sit back and build the product. We actually have to show some growth, and we have to show it to some outside party that will be disappointed if we don't grow as much, or not. So that forced us to solve a bunch of different problems that we hadn't thought about before, and to actually go ahead and do the hard work to grow the company, which was probably not our natural instinct otherwise. Our natural instinct was just to go and solve this more interesting technical problem. So I think that accountability and that focus is the main value of YC, besides the network, obviously, which is also super valuable.
Right. And it's very interesting that you pointed out about a metric. It reminded me about how Facebook had a one single North Star metric every year. So do you think when you're starting you wanted to run in hundreds of directions? This is for early stage entrepreneurs who are listeners out here. What advice would you give to founders? Should they focus on just one or two North Star metrics? And what metrics do you think are important?
Yeah, I think narrow down the metrics for sure, and be honest with yourself about hitting these metrics, because you might be able to fake a metric to an outside observer, but you can't really fake it to yourself. And if you're really trying for something, you'll find out, you'll get this feedback in this iteration cycle of whether you're doing the right thing or not. So this is another lesson from trading, because at the end of every trading day, you get a number, and that number is how much you made or you lost on that day. And so by constantly getting this feedback of a number, you're able to steer yourself and to steer your strategies to better align with optimizing that. So yeah, I definitely focus and just be true to be true to yourself with regards to these metrics.
And when it comes to Cord, you got a couple of products, which is the web app, the automation API, and what is the cost of the product, and is it a yearly contract that you sign up with the company?
Yeah, they're yearly contracts, and the cost is it's kind of bespoke at this point, because we talk to our customers, we see how much data they need, what their particular requirements are, do they need model integrations, and so we'll come up with a quote that kind of fits their particular use case. We have different tiers which kind of set like the prior for the price, and the tier is also like a function of the size of the client, the number of users, and all these things. But we prefer to get yearly contracts. And another key from YC is don't do free trials. So don't do free pilots. Anytime that you're selling to customer, you should be selling it for real money. And that's a lesson we learned even before YC, but was definitely reiterated many times throughout the process.
Very interesting. And when it comes to decision making, how do you approach decision making when you have already raised a bit of amount of funding and you scale your team? Unlike you had a structure where there are only two of you in the team. How do you approach decision making now?
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's nice to have another co-founder that you can always bounce things off and bounce the final decisions on. Our intuition is, when you have data, use the data. So if you have something to at least anchor what the prior is for the decision, start there, and then you can work off of that in either direction, depending on like what your subjective kind of feeling or what the other like qualifications to the problem are. But other than that, it's really, there's no secret to decision making. I think one of the things about starting a startup is it's really like just a constant slew, like onslaught of decisions that you have to make, and so it's something that you just practice. It's like any skill. Is like, okay, do I do this or this? I'll just do this. I'll be okay with it. Sometimes you get it wrong, you learn, and you just move on. So just being able to also review the old decisions that you did get wrong, and learn and make sure that you're incorporating the lessons. If you're doing that kind of practice, eventually you'll just get better at it, and the process will become easier.
Right. And how do you look at reversible and irreversible decisions when it comes to especially when it comes to scaling a company? How do you determine that?
Yeah, I mean, so you try not to get into irreversible decisions without like trying something, getting some amount of feedback, and it can be even like a small amount of feedback, just a taste to guide what the intuition for the right path is, because there's such uncertainty bounds over every decision that you make that it's better if you can like do some kind of prototyping or some kind of experiment to at least like give you some idea of the way to go. But other than that, yeah, again, it's just being confident in yourself as a decision maker. You start a company, you've done a bunch of decisions. Hopefully you're getting good at it, and you can just trust your instinct. And at the end of the day, like, your instinct is kind of what's going to guide the company. and either it'll work or not. But that's kind of the bet that you're making in your own instinct in that you're starting a company in the first place.
Right. Interesting. And what's your learning process when you look at learning new topics and material, especially when it comes to complex problem that you're trying to solve?
Yeah, so I love learning, and I think it's just really it's just something that if you enjoy it, then you're going to want to do it. So we're always trying to read new papers and the latest things that are coming out in the machine learning world. It's a very fast moving field. So by being in it, you just are forcing yourself to learn constantly. But again, learning kind of like decision making is just a skill that you kind of develop over your lifetime. And if you do it enough times, like you start the patterns in which you realize what works for me to learn, you go down that path. So sometimes it's how to configure the space in a mental way that I know that I'll understand it better. Something is like a geometric problem, something that might not be necessarily geometric. I think of it geometrically to try to understand it better, so that it fits closer in my mind. And that's a skill that just came from trying to learn as much as possible, over time.
Got it. And since you were two founders, what does it take to create an environment of safety where both the founders can express their ideas, thoughts, and concerns? I believe that you knew your co-founder from a long time, but how do you build that environment of safety even when you're looking to build your company?
It's really starting from the very beginning to opening a culture of transparency between you, in the very, very beginning. So that was a talk that we had, in the very beginnings, we want to be able to express ourselves freely and just to be honest, because if you're not and you're constantly holding something back, that will build over time and that will cause problems later. So it's better just to air things out as they come. And that just came from establishing what the ground rules were from the start of the company. So yeah, if you do that from the outset, it will pay dividends later with your relationship with your co-founder.
Got it. And when it comes to culture of a company, what sort of failures would would the company accept? I know it can be a difficult topic at times, but are there any sort of failures which you could expect for your product guys to make?
Definitely ethical. So if there's any kind of integrity issues or ethical issues, I think that's a deal breaker. It's a non-starter. Other than that, most things can be corrected. And culture, I think it was Dalton Caldwell from YC said, culture is just how you behave. It's just how you are personally, and it's the sum of the personalities of the company. So if you just try to behave in an upright way, and in a way that the right way to behave and the wrong way to behave. So if you just try to do it the right thing, the culture will hopefully follow in that direction. But yeah, if there's a failing in terms of lying or cheating in some way, that's definitely a major red flag.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think ethical issues should not be entertained in any company. And I understand that you're in London, but I believe you're a fully remote company. How do you look at ensuring morale within your team when you're not able to meet them face to face, and how do you connect with your team?
Yeah, it's through video calls and Slack, WhatsApp. But it is difficult, and it's a challenge that we're going to have to navigate. But if you trust your team members and you trust the people that you hire, then it becomes less of a problem, because you did the due diligence on them when you kind of brought them on, so you can trust them enough autonomy to be able to do the right things. Obviously, when the company grows and it's very big, then you need more structured processes in place to manage the different moving parts, to make sure everyone is kind of moving in the same direction and they're not canceling each other out. But at an early stage company, when you have, employees that you trust, it becomes less of an issue.
And do you believe, most of the early stage companies, or even, any company for that matter, will they be fully remote, or do you think there's going to be a structure of hybrid work from home as well as going to the office? And what is your company thinking when it comes to working?
I think, there definitely will be fully remote companies in the future, and there's going to be like a natural self-selection where the people that operate the best in a fully remote environment, they're going to go start fully remote companies or work at fully remote companies. And the people that like to be in the office, they're going to go work for companies in the office. So there's just going to be this natural separation over time where people drift towards the environments that work the best for them. What we realize is that some people do work better in an office, and so we wanted to give like some optionality, like get an office in London. People can go there if they want, but also they can work from home also if they want. So try to optimize on their own feelings for themselves as to like what the best modality is.
All right, and Eric, I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
So a book I really like is The Man Who Solved the Market about James Simons, who started Renaissance. And I think the key there, it's more a biography about him. It's less of a business book, but the key insight there is that the quality of the hedge fund of Renaissance, and it's the best hedge fund of all time, by the returns or in the very top, is not in any specific secret that they have or any secret sauce, but in the quality of people that they attract. So your long-term competitive advantage as a company is really the quality of the people that you attract. It is the people. That is what the company is. And so I think that insight from that book was very valuable and is a strong guide for us as we're hiring.
Interesting. And if you could go back in time when you started Cord, what is the one thing you were focused on or done anything differently?
So it would have been on trying to sell earlier rather than trying to build product. And that was the lesson that we learned in YC is, it is a business. So you are trying to sell things to people. So avoid your natural instinct to just go and build something forever and get it out into the world and get feedback on it. That's the best way that you're going to build the product in the end anyway, is to get the market's feedback on it.
Interesting. And do you have any favorite online tools, example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
Well, I think Slack is the main one, and Zoom. Those are just like, it's kind of boring, but those are the main tools that we use, and it's just super useful. So yeah, I think that's it.
All right. And I understand that you are looking at hiring, ML engineers and other research scientists. What is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Cord?
Yeah, you can email us at hello@Cord.tech, and send a CV, and like what you're looking to do. And we're definitely looking for people now. We're growing in ML engineering and in full stack and DevOps roles. So really beefing up the engineering team. So we're just looking for great people.
Awesome. Eric, thank you so much for taking your time speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Thanks a lot, Rohit.